My name is Serafina. Serafina Nightingale. It sounds almost ethereal, doesn't it? Like something out of a fairy tale. My life, however, was anything but. We lived in the quiet hamlet of Oakhaven, nestled beside a river where the ancient willows met the rolling hills of Emerald Meadow. Oakhaven, with its bucolic charm and tight-knit community, often felt more like a beautifully painted prison than a refuge. My story, you see, began long before I had the ability to record it. In my family, the eldest daughter wasn't simply asked to assist. She was expected to become the hands, the heart, and the steadfast support for every child that followed. It was an unspoken contract, written not in words, but in expectations, a legacy handed down through generations of Nightingale women. My mother, a woman of soft smiles and hidden sorrows, seemed to view motherhood not as a cherished calling, but as a series of recurring chores. A young mother herself, pregnancies were like the tides, inevitable, frequent, and sometimes a bit unwelcome. My father, a talented blacksmith with hands that could craft wonders from raw iron, seemed to become lost amidst the everyday realities of a growing family. His earnings frequently disappeared into the lure of rare metals or evenings spent at the local pub, the Golden Kettle, where the air was thick with laughter and the scent of roasted barley. By the young age of 6, I was already holding a small baby, changing diapers with awkward, oversized hands. I remember the tender weight of the child, a stark contrast to the worry growing in my small heart. By 8, I was managing a household with 3 younger siblings, my days a blur of feeding times, nursery rhymes, and endless games of tag. My parents, always seeking a moment of peace, would announce their evenings out with a dramatic flourish, leaving me to handle the chaotic needs of my siblings. Soon, you'll be married and passing the torch, my mother would say, her eyes settling on me with a sense of quiet resignation. It felt less like a hopeful future and more like an established destiny, a duty given without consent. Years slipped by, marked by milestones I only partially experienced. Birthday parties were shared celebrations, school concerts were attended in rotations, and my dreams were quietly put away, like delicate treasures hidden in a dusty box. Then came the year I turned 14. My mother, with a heavy heart, called me to the kitchen table. Another pregnancy, another life joining our already crowded home. This time, however, there was a distinct difference. She gave me a well-used calendar, its cover decorated with worn images of birds. Inside, neatly written, was a family roster. My name was written next to the title, Head Caretaker, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. "You're old enough to handle the night wakings now, dear," she said, her voice softening slightly. My father, ever a man of few words, nodded from his favorite chair, the faint glow of the radio illuminating his tired face. "We've canceled your after-school choir practice, sweetheart," my mother continued, her tone filled with an unspoken apology. "Family comes first, you understand that." The worst blow came later, when they informed me that I would need to find part-time work to buy formula. Money was always scarce, stretched thin across too many needs. "It's an opportunity for you to develop real-world skills," my father announced, his voice laced with manufactured enthusiasm. They called it love, they called it tradition, they called it family. What I felt was the slow, steady destruction of my own identity. My days became a relentless cycle. Up at 5:30 a.m. to prepare breakfast for 4 hungry mouths, then off to school, where I struggled to stay awake during lessons, the burden of responsibility heavy on my young body. Once, I dozed off during a parent-teacher meeting, the soft rhythm of the teacher's voice lulling me into a short, sweet escape. My parents, upon hearing of my momentary lapse, shared the story with a mixture of amusement and annoyance. "She must be staying up all night chatting with friends," they chuckled, oblivious to the truth. The youngest, little Ethan, started calling me Mama at the market. The sympathetic looks from strangers, the quiet murmurs of pity, were a constant reminder of the role I was forced to play. The weight of it all pushed down on me, a constant, suffocating pressure. The breaking point came with the crisp, official letter bearing the seal of Silverwood Academy. I had poured my heart and soul into my studies, driven by a strong desire for something beyond the boundaries of Oakhaven. A full academic scholarship, A chance to study literature, my lifelong passion. For once, I wasn't an underage mother. I was just Serafina, a normal girl with a future ahead of her like an open book. I was in the middle of happy tears, rereading the letter for the 10th time, when my mother walked in, her face a mask of strained emotion. "I'm expecting," she announced, the words hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. Triplets, this time. That same week, my father's usual absent-mindedness evolved into complete neglect. I was the one holding my mother's hair back when the morning sickness overwhelmed her, massaging her swollen ankles and figuring out her strange cravings. All while juggling the needs of the existing children, the never-ending routine of meals, baths, and bedtime stories. Then came the phone call from the academy counselor. Final paperwork was due by 3 p.m. the following week. I remember rushing my mother to the healer for an appointment. She was having an episode while trying to keep the kids from running wild. Then little Ethan developed a rash and wouldn't stop crying. I missed the deadline by just 15 minutes. The scholarship was taken away, deemed a victim of my lack of commitment. The academy would have been selfish anyway, my parents said, their words echoing in the empty chambers of my heart. And so, in the quiet corners of my mind, I began to plot my escape. I applied to the local craft school, the Emerald Meadow Guild, securing a spot in their writing program. I found a part-time job at Bloom's bookshop, shelving books and assisting customers, carefully hiding my earnings in an old jewelry box, buried beneath a collection of childhood keepsakes. My 16-year-old sister, Ren, a sensitive soul with eyes that held the wisdom of old forests, discovered my secret. She promised to keep my secret safe, her loyalty a fragile flower in a garden overgrown with expectation. For a short, fleeting moment, everything seemed to be falling into place. The acceptance letter nestled safely in my history textbook, the hidden savings slowly growing. I even started dreaming of a life beyond Oakhaven, a life where I could write stories and cultivate my own passions. Then, the inevitable storm. My parents discovered the acceptance letter, hidden away in the pages of my textbook. My mother cried, a flood of tears fueled by guilt and resentment. My father threatened to kick me out, to take away even the little safety I had. I remained silent, my determination hardening with each accusation. The following day, I returned from my shift at Bloom's bookshop to find our small cottage surrounded by officials. My parents, in a desperate attempt to protect themselves, had accused me of mistreatment. Me, the one who had given up her childhood, her dreams, her very self, for the sake of her siblings. The lead official, Mr. Silas Thorne, a man with gentle eyes and a serious demeanor, saw through the lie. But he presented me with an impossible choice: stay and continue as the primary caregiver, or risk my siblings being placed in the impersonal care of the orphanage. My parents stood there, their faces radiating a smug satisfaction. They believed they had won. But I had an ace up my sleeve. A small, silver recorder hidden in Ren's pocket. For weeks, Ren had been recording their conversations, capturing the subtle undertones of their manipulation, the blatant disregard for my well-being. Now she slipped the device into my hand, her touch a lifeline in a sea of despair. "These recordings," I said, my voice trembling but gaining strength, "they show everything." My mother's face paled, the carefully constructed mask of victimhood crumbling. My father lunged forward, his hand outstretched, but Mr. Thorne intervened, his voice firm. "Let's all remain calm. Serafina, can you please show me what you have?" I played the first recording. My mother's voice, clear and unmistakable, filled the room. "Serafina needs to learn her place. She's the eldest girl. This is her duty until she marries and has her own eldest daughter to take over." Then, my father's voice, harsh and unyielding. "If she thinks she's going to the guild instead of raising those kids, she's got another thing coming. We'll make sure of that." Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. My parents exchanged panicked glances, their carefully crafted story unraveling before their eyes. Then, as always, my mother reverted to tears. "That's taken out of context," she wailed, her voice rising in hysteria. "Serafina must have edited it with one of those machines. Kids these days can fake anything with technology. My father seized upon her desperate claim. She's been unstable lately, talking about abandoning the family. She probably made this up to get attention. Mr. Thorne, his expression unreadable, surveyed the scene. These are serious allegations. We'll need to verify the authenticity of these recordings. Call Jasper, my mother said suddenly, her voice laced with desperation. My nephew, Jasper. He works with machines. He can prove these are fake within an hour. Cousin Jasper arrived, armed with his contraptions and an air of smug confidence. He was 25, the family's resident tech expert. He listened to the recordings, tinkered away at his equipment, then looked up at Mr. Thorne, his expression grave. Audio manipulation is incredibly easy these days, he declared. There are dozens of tools that can splice conversations together. There's no way to prove these are real. Wren's face crumpled, her hope flickering like a dying ember. My own heart sank. Of course, the family would protect their own, circling the wagons to defend their flawed traditions. Mr. Thorne made notes on his clipboard, his silence amplifying my despair. I'll need to investigate further. In the meantime, the children will remain in the home under the current arrangement. As Mr. Thorne departed, my parents' masks vanished, replaced by a chilling anger. My mother grabbed my arm, her grip tight enough to leave bruises. You think you're so clever? We're calling a family gathering. Let's see what Aunt Beatrice thinks about you trying to destroy this family. The following morning, our cottage was overflowing with relatives, their faces a mixture of concern and condemnation. Aunt Beatrice, the family matriarch, sat in the living room like a queen holding court, her presence radiating an aura of unyielding authority. She had raised 12 children and believed that suffering built character, that happiness was a passing fancy. I hear you've been making trouble, she said, her gaze settling on me with disapproval. Recording your parents like some kind of spy. In my day, children who disrespected their elders got a spanking. My aunts nodded in agreement, their faces etched with disapproval. Uncle Theodore, a solicitor, sat beside Aunt Beatrice, diligently taking notes. My mother, ever the master of theatrics, dabbed at her eyes, feigning distress. Serafina's always been difficult, she said, her voice trembling. We've tried everything. We even found a healer, a friend, who's been documenting her behavior issues. She produced a folder overflowing with papers. I recognized the letterhead of Ms. Eleanor Croft, a healer who had gone to school with my mother. The documents claimed I exhibited signs of severe attachment disorder, oppositional defiance, and pathological lying. Lies woven into a tapestry of fabricated evidence. These are fake. I protested, but Aunt Beatrice silenced me with a withering glance. Children who won't fulfill their family duties are sick in the head, she declared, her voice resonating with unshakable conviction. Your mother did her duty, I did mine. Every woman in this family has done hers. You think you're special. Over the next few days, the family was ripped apart. A few cousins privately expressed their sympathy, but none dared to speak out publicly. Family tradition was sacred. Breaking it meant betraying everything they stood for. My parents filed paperwork with the court, claiming I was mentally unstable and had been turning the younger children against them. They sought emergency custody, formally transferring all caretaking responsibilities to them, with me barred from any contact with my siblings. The irony was almost unbearable. You're going to regret this, my father said that night, his voice laced with quiet menace. We've given you everything, a roof over your head, food, a purpose. And this is how you repay us. The locks were changed the following morning. I returned from my shift at Bloom's bookshop to find my key useless. My meager possessions were piled in sacks on the lawn, scattered like fallen leaves. The restraining order was nailed to the front door, a legal declaration born of lies and desperation. It claimed I had threatened them during the family meeting, an accusation so absurd it bordered on the comical. Wren watched from her bedroom window, tears streaming down her face. She held up her recorder, mouthing, "I'm recording." But what good would more recordings do when the entire family was against us? I spent the night in my ancient cart, a battered Willow Motors Skylark handed down from my late grandmother, parked behind Bloom's bookshop, shivering in the pre-dawn chill. Mr. Hawthorne, my kind-hearted boss, found me the next morning when he arrived to open the store. I begged him to keep my situation a secret. I needed this job more than ever. But in Oakhaven, secrets were as rare as dragon's teeth. By the end of the week, 3 of my father's blacksmith crew buddies had visited the store, lingering in my checkout line, making pointed comments about ungrateful children who didn't appreciate their parents' sacrifices. Mr. Hawthorne called me into his office the following day, his face etched with concern. "Serafina, I'm sorry, but we've been getting complaints. Customers say you seem distracted, that you're making mistakes. With everything going on, maybe it's best if you take some time off." "Please," I begged, tears welling in my eyes. "I need this job. I don't have anywhere else to go." He looked away, his discomfort palpable. "It's just temporary, until things settle down with your family situation." But we both knew it was a polite dismissal, a veiled way of saying goodbye. In a small town where my father's crew did half the construction work, crossing him meant facing consequences. I spent the next 2 nights in my cart before the Oakhaven Women's Haven finally had an opening. The intake worker looked at my restraining order, her brow furrowed. "Your parents filed this against their own daughter?" I nodded, too exhausted to explain. The Haven was loud and crowded, a cacophony of whispered stories and shared anxieties. But it was better than my cart. I had a bed, a locker for my meager belongings, and access to a warm bath. I could figure out the rest later. The family court hearing was scheduled for the following week. My parents had Uncle Theodore representing them, his services offered pro bono. I had no one. Legal aid said I didn't qualify, since technically, I wasn't seeking custody. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed in my best clothes, a simple cotton dress wrinkled from being stored in the trunk of my car. Ren texted me, "They've been coaching the kids all week." "I'm so sorry." I walked into the courtroom to find my parents looking like model citizens. My mother wore a conservative dress, her face carefully composed. My father sported a suit I'd never seen before, its pristine lines a stark contrast to his calloused hands. They had brought character witnesses, my mother's supervisor from the Whispering Pines Dental Clinic, my father's foreman from Meadowbrook Construction, even Ms. Croft, armed with her fraudulent therapy notes. "Your Honor," Uncle Theodore began, his voice smooth and confident. "My clients are hardworking parents doing their best with a troubled teenager. Serafina has always had difficulty accepting authority. These recordings she claims to have are clearly fabricated, as our IT expert will testify." Jasper took the stand and repeated his claims about audio manipulation, demonstrating the ease with which conversations could be faked. He was smooth, professional, believable. Then, my parents testified, painting a picture of a rebellious daughter who resented having younger siblings, who made up stories for attention, who had threatened to destroy the family if she didn't get her way. "We love all our children equally," my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. "But Serafina has always been different, difficult. We've tried so hard to help her." When it was my turn to speak, I felt like I was drowning. Every word sounded weak compared to their carefully prepared statements. I tried to explain the years of caretaking, the missed opportunities, the parentification, but without concrete proof, it was my word against theirs. "Where are these recordings now?" the judge asked, his expression skeptical. "My sister has them," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Ren. She's been documenting everything." "Your 16-year-old sister?" the judge asked, his skepticism growing. "The one your parents claim you've been manipulating." Ren was called to testify. She walked in looking smaller than usual, her hands trembling. Our parents stared at her from their table, their faces a mixture of hope and veiled threat. Uncle Theodore smiled at her, a shark greeting its prey. "Ren," he began gently, "has your sister, Serafina, been asking you to record your parents?" Ren glanced at me, then at our parents, her eyes filled with conflicting emotions. She didn't ask me to. I did it on my own. But she knew about it. She encouraged it." Her voice cracked, her resolve wavering. I just wanted to help." "Of course you did. You love your sister. But sometimes people we love can lead us astray." Has Serafina been telling you stories about your parents, making you see things differently? I watched Ren crumble under the pressure. Our parents had gotten to her, threatened her, made her doubt herself. By the time Uncle Theodore was finished, it looked like I'd masterminded some elaborate scheme to turn my siblings against their loving parents. The judge looked troubled, but seemed to be buying into their narrative. I felt the walls closing in, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, being twisted into evidence against me. That's when Mr. Thorne stood up, his presence radiating calm authority. Your Honor, I'd like to present some additional findings from my investigation. He approached the bench with a thick manila folder, his expression resolute. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their carefully constructed composure faltering. Uncle Theodore's confident smile vanished. During my investigation, I discovered some concerning financial discrepancies, Mr. Thorne said, his voice calm but firm. Mrs. Nightingale has been collecting government aid for childcare services for the past 8 years. My mother's face drained of color. My father gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. The applications state that she requires childcare assistance due to her work schedule at the Whispering Pines Dental Clinic. However, my investigation revealed that Serafina has been the primary caregiver during all the hours covered by this assistance. Uncle Theodore jumped to his feet, his voice laced with indignation. Your Honor, this is clearly a misunderstanding. My client may have made some clerical errors. Clerical errors that total over 20,000 crowns in fraudulent claims? Mr. Thorne interjected, his voice unwavering. He produced photocopies of the applications, each one signed by Mrs. Nightingale, claiming she was paying for professional childcare services. The judge leaned forward, his attention piqued. Mr. Thorne, are you suggesting aid fraud? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Your Honor. Furthermore, Mr. Thorne continued, Mr. Nightingale has been claiming Serafina as a dependent on his taxes while simultaneously requiring her to work to support the household. He's been collecting child tax credits for a child who is functioning as an unpaid nanny and contributing financially to the family. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. This is ridiculous. We've supported Serafina her entire life. Sit down, Mr. Nightingale, the judge ordered sharply. Mr. Thorne, do you have documentation to support these claims? Mr. Thorne nodded and handed over more papers. Bank records showing deposits from government assistance programs, tax returns showing dependent claims, and, most damningly, security footage from the benefits office showing Mrs. Nightingale signing the applications herself. My mother began to sob loudly, not the calculated tears from earlier, but a raw, desperate display of panic. We were just trying to make ends meet. Blacksmithing work is seasonal. We needed help. Then why force your daughter to provide free childcare while collecting money meant to pay for that exact service? The judge asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Uncle Theodore attempted to salvage the situation. Your Honor, even if there were some financial irregularities, that doesn't negate the fact that Serafina has been exhibiting concerning behavior. Actually, Mr. Thorne interjected again, I had those recordings analyzed by an independent audio forensics expert, not someone related to the family. He glanced pointedly at Jasper, who suddenly found the floor very interesting. They're authentic. No signs of manipulation or editing. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Theodore, were you aware that your expert witness was a family member when you presented him as an objective professional? The courtroom fell silent. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. Ren had started crying quietly in her seat, her shoulders shaking. Uncle Theodore stammered, He has legitimate IT credentials. That's not what I asked. Were you aware he was related to your clients? Yes, Your Honor. And you didn't think that was relevant information to disclose? The courtroom fell silent. Mr. Thorne, what else did your investigation uncover? A pattern of parentification dating back to when Serafina was 6 years old. Multiple witnesses from the children's schools have confirmed that Serafina was often the one attending parent-teacher conferences, signing permission slips with her parents' consent, and handling medical appointments for the younger children. She produced more documents. I also discovered that Serafina's Academy scholarship was withdrawn due to missed deadlines that occurred while she was caring for a sick infant, the same infant her parents claimed they were paying professional childcare to watch. The judge reviewed the papers, his frown deepening with each page. Mr. and Mrs. Nightingale, I'm going to ask you directly, have you been collecting government assistance for childcare while forcing your eldest daughter to provide that care for free? My mother looked at my father. My father looked at Uncle Theodore. Uncle Theodore looked defeated. Your Honor, my mother finally said, her voice small and broken, we were just doing what our parents did. This is how families work. The eldest daughter helps with the babies. It's tradition. Tradition doesn't override the law, Mrs. Nightingale. Nor does it excuse aid fraud. The judge turned to me. Serafina, do you have anything you'd like to add? I stood on shaky legs, feeling the weight of my life, my choices, hanging in the balance. I just wanted to go to the academy. I worked so hard for that scholarship. I love my siblings, but I wanted a chance at my own life. When I tried to leave, they called officials and claimed I was neglectful. They changed the locks. They got a restraining order based on lies. I've been sleeping in my cart and then at a haven because my own parents made me homeless for wanting an education. She's being dramatic, my father started, but the judge cut him off with a sharp gesture. Mr. Nightingale, I've heard enough. Mr. Thorne, what are your recommendations? Given the evidence of financial fraud and the systematic parentification of Serafina, I recommend a full investigation by the Department of Social Services. I also recommend that the restraining order against Serafina be immediately vacated, as it appears to have been obtained under false pretenses. The judge nodded, his expression grim. I'm inclined to agree. I'm also ordering a forensic accounting review of the Nightingale family finances. Mr. and Mrs. Nightingale, you should be aware that aid fraud is a criminal offense that can result in prosecution. My parents went white, their carefully constructed facade crumbling completely. Uncle Theodore started gathering his papers, clearly wanting to distance himself from the impending disaster. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering temporary custody of the minor children to remain with the parents under strict supervision from social services. Serafina, you are not to be required to provide any childcare. Any violation of this order will result in immediate removal of the children. But who will watch them? My mother cried, her voice laced with desperation. We can't afford. Perhaps you should have thought of that before committing fraud with the money meant to pay for childcare, the judge said coldly. Court is adjourned. Mr. and Mrs. Nightingale, do not leave the state. You'll be notified of the criminal investigation proceedings. The gavel came down, its resounding echo signaling the end of an era, the shattering of a long-held illusion. My parents sat frozen, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. They had tried to trap me, but had trapped themselves instead. Outside the courthouse, Mr. Thorne pulled me aside, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and empathy. Serafina, I know this is overwhelming, but you should know that the forensic accountant will likely uncover more than just the childcare fraud. If your father has been claiming you as a dependent while you were working, that's tax fraud too. I nodded numbly, the implications washing over me in waves. What happens now? Now, you focus on rebuilding your life. The restraining order will be vacated within 24 hours. You can return home to retrieve your belongings. I'll arrange for a police escort if you'd prefer. I don't want to go back there, I said quickly, a tremor of fear running through me. Not to live. I just want my things. That's understandable. Do you have somewhere to stay? The haven has space for another week. I shrugged, the future a vast, uncertain landscape. Without my job at Bloom's bookshop, I had no idea what I'd do. Mr. Thorne handed me a business card. This is a transitional housing program for young adults escaping family abuse, the Willow House. Tell them I sent you. They can help with housing and job placement. I took the card with trembling hands, gratitude swelling in my chest. Thank you for everything. If you hadn't investigated. You can thank your sister, she said, a gentle smile gracing her lips. Wren didn't just have recordings. She had a diary going back 2 years, documenting everything. Times, dates, specific incidents. That's what prompted me to dig deeper into the finances. My heart swelled with gratitude for Wren. She had been braver than any of us realized, her quiet strength a beacon in the darkness. As I walked away from the courthouse, my phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from family members, some of whom had been present at the hearing, were already circulating the news. Some were angry, branding me a traitor. Others were shocked, grappling with the revelations of fraud. Aunt Beatrice sent a particularly scathing message about ungrateful children who didn't understand sacrifice. I deleted them all, refusing to read past the first few words. Their opinions no longer mattered. The next few days passed in a blur. True to Mr. Thorne's word, the restraining order was lifted. I returned to the cottage with a police escort to retrieve my belongings. My parents were absent, but Wren was there, her eyes red-rimmed but shining with unwavering support. She flew into my arms the moment she saw me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "They made me say those things. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd send the little ones away." "It's okay," I said, holding her tight. "You were so brave. Mr. Thorne told me about your diary." "I started it when you got your scholarship," she admitted, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I knew they'd try to stop you. I wanted to make sure there was proof of what they put you through." We packed my things quickly, our movements guided by a shared sense of urgency. My acceptance letter to Emerald Meadow Guild was still nestled in my history textbook. The hidden money was still in the old jewelry box, untouched, a small testament to my thwarted hopes. "What's going to happen to us, Serafina?" Wren asked, her voice laced with fear as we loaded sacks into the police officer's car. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but whatever happens, I'll make sure you and the kids are okay." "I promise." She nodded, trying to be brave. Maybe now Mom and Dad will actually have to take care of their own children. The thought was almost laughable. They'd never had to before. But with social services watching and criminal charges looming, they wouldn't have a choice. I moved into the Willow house the following week. It was a small cottage shared with 2 other young women, each with her own story of escaping a toxic family environment. We had our own bedrooms and shared the common areas. It was clean, safe, and most importantly, mine. The program also helped me find a new job at Sweet Reed's bookstore, a charming little shop across town, far from my father's blacksmith connections. The owner, Mrs. Willowbrook, was incredibly understanding about my situation and flexible with scheduling around my classes. I decided to enroll at Emerald Meadow Guild, starting with the next semester. My acceptance was still valid, and with financial aid and my new job, I could make it work. It wouldn't be the prestigious Silverwood Academy, but it was still a step forward, a chance to cultivate my passion for literature. 2 weeks after the hearing, the inevitable happened. My parents were formally charged with aid fraud and tax evasion. The forensic accountant had found exactly what Mr. Thorne had predicted, years of false claims totaling over $30,000. Uncle Theodore, predictably, refused to represent them, citing a conflict of interest. They were forced to rely on a public defender. The irony was not lost on me. They'd claimed I didn't qualify for legal aid, but now they needed it themselves. Wren kept me updated through carefully worded texts. Our parents were panicking, burdened by the weight of their actions. They'd been ordered to repay all the fraudulent claims, plus penalties. The cottage might have to be sold. My father's blacksmith boss had cut his hours after hearing about the charges. My mother had been suspended from the dental clinic, pending the outcome of the criminal case. For the first time in their lives, they were facing the consequences of their choices. Wren said the cottage was in chaos. The younger children didn't understand why I wasn't there to make breakfast or help with homework. My parents were overwhelmed, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. Mom actually had to change a diaper yesterday. Wren texted me one evening, punctuating her message with a weary emoji. She acted like it was the end of the world. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly, I just felt a profound sadness. Sad for my siblings, who were confused and scared. Sad that it had come to this. Even a little sad for my parents, who were so entrenched in their own upbringing they couldn't see the harm they had inflicted. The family reaction was swift and brutal. Aunt Beatrice called an emergency family meeting that I was, of course, Not invited to. Ren reported back that it was a disaster. Half the family thought my parents were victims of an ungrateful daughter. The other half were quietly admitting they'd seen the signs, but hadn't wanted to get involved. Cousin Clara stood up and said she went through the same thing, Ren told me during one of our phone calls, her voice hushed with disbelief. She said Aunt Beatrice made her raise her 5 younger siblings too. Then Aunt Daisy said it happened to her. Suddenly, everyone was arguing about whether it was tradition or abuse. The family was fracturing along generational lines. The older generation insisted it was just how things were done. The younger generation was starting to question why it was always the eldest daughters who sacrificed everything. 3 months into the criminal proceedings, my parents did something reckless, something desperate. They fled. I was in my evening writing class when my phone started buzzing incessantly. I ignored it, knowing that responding during class was disrespectful, until I saw Mr. Thorne's name flashing across the screen. My blood ran cold. I excused myself and hurried into the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. Serafina, your parents missed their court date this morning. They've also pulled the younger children out of school. We believe they're attempting to leave the state. A wave of nausea washed over me. What about Ren? She's the one who alerted us. She's safe at school right now. She overheard your parents making plans. Apparently, they packed up the van last night and told the kids they were going on a surprise vacation. I sank onto a bench in the hallway, the weight of the world pressing down on me. They were really going to run, take the kids and disappear rather than face the consequences of their actions. What can I do? I asked, my voice trembling. Stay where you are. Don't try to intervene. We've notified state police and issued an alert for the children. Ren said she overheard them talking about going to stay with relatives in North Carolina. Of course, I muttered. My father had cousins there, people who probably had no idea about the charges. They could disappear into another big family, where eldest daughters raising siblings was just normal life. I returned to class, but my mind was a whirlwind of anxiety. My professor, Dr. Ramirez, noticed my distress and quietly told me I could leave if I needed to. I gathered my things and drove back to the Willow House, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The next few hours were agonizing. I sat by my phone, waiting for updates, every ring sending a jolt of fear through my body. My roommates, Maria and Chloe, made me herbal tea and sat with me, sharing their own stories of family dysfunction. It helped knowing I wasn't alone. Finally, around midnight, Mr. Thorne called. We found them. State police stopped them at a gas station about an hour from the North Carolina border. Everyone is safe. I sobbed with relief, the pent-up tension finally breaking free. What happens now? Your parents are being arrested for custodial interference and violating their bond conditions. The children are being placed in emergency foster care until we can determine the best placement. What about Ren? She's 18, almost 19. We're looking into emergency emancipation so she can maintain some independence. Mr. Thorne paused, his voice softening. Serafina, I need to ask you something. Would you consider taking temporary guardianship of your siblings? The question I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. I don't know if I can. I'm barely managing to support myself. I understand. It's not a decision you need to make tonight. But think about it. Foster care isn't ideal, and you're the only family member who's shown genuine concern for their well-being. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, wrestling with my conscience. I'd fought so hard to escape the role of surrogate mother. The thought of voluntarily taking it on again made me feel sick, a deep-seated resentment bubbling to the surface. But the thought of my siblings scattered across anonymous foster homes, their lives adrift, made me feel even worse. I called Ren. She answered on the first ring, sounding exhausted. Hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm at the police station. They're being really nice. They gave me hot chocolate. Mr. Thorne said they're looking into emancipating me early. Yeah, he mentioned that. I hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject. He also asked if you thought I'd take the kids. Ren was quiet for a long moment. What do you think you should do? I let out a shaky breath. I think you should do whatever keeps you safe and healthy. You've sacrificed enough for this family. But She trailed off, her voice laced with a mixture of hope and trepidation. But maybe we could do it differently? Together? Not like before, where you did everything, but like actual sisters helping each other? I could get a part-time job. We could apply for assistance, the legal kind. Make sure the kids get therapy to deal with everything. Break the cycle for real. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. It would mean giving up the Willow House, finding a bigger place, putting some of my dreams on hold again. Or maybe, Ren continued softly, just dreaming differently. Classes during the day, homework help at night. School plays and guild performances. Normal family stuff, but where everyone pitches in, where the kids see what a real family looks like. She was painting a picture I'd never dared imagine, a family where responsibility was shared, where love didn't mean sacrifice, where we could heal together. Can I think about it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Of course. But Serafina, whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. You stood up to them. You broke free. That took more courage than any of us had. The next morning, I met with Mr. Thorne and a family court advocate. They laid out what temporary guardianship would entail. Financial assistance was available. The kids would get counseling. Ren would be emancipated and could be a co-guardian. We'd have support from social services every step of the way. Your parents will likely get prison time, the advocate explained, her voice gentle but firm. 2 to 3 years, based on the charges. The kids need stability during that time. Foster care can provide that, but family placement is always preferred, if it's healthy. I thought about my siblings, the 8-year-old who'd stopped talking to me after our parents' manipulation, the twins, who were probably so confused and frightened, the baby, who'd called me Mama before I even taught him my real name. What about Aunt Beatrice? I asked, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Won't she try to get custody? Mr. Thorne shook his head. She's been deemed unfit due to her age and the fact that she knew about the parentification and encouraged it. Several family members have come forward with their own stories after your case became known. She's facing her own investigation now. The dominoes were falling throughout the family, the secret everyone had kept for generations finally exposed to the light. If I say yes, I said slowly, my voice gaining strength, I need guarantees. The kids get therapy. Ren and I get family counseling to learn how to do this right. Financial support for housing and childcare, real childcare, not me missing classes. And help navigating school with this responsibility. All of that can be arranged, the advocate assured me, her expression earnest. We want this to succeed. If you choose to do it, the goal is to break the cycle, not perpetuate it. I asked for one more day to decide. That evening, I sat with my roommates and talked it through. They'd both escaped abusive families and understood the enormity of what I was considering. The question is, Maria said, her brow furrowed with concern, can you live with either decision? If you take them, can you handle the responsibility without losing yourself? If you don't, can you handle the guilt? It was a fair question. I'd spent so long being forced into motherhood that I didn't know if I could choose it freely. But maybe that was the point. This time, it would be a choice. That night, I made a list, pros and cons, dreams deferred versus siblings scattered, the life I'd planned versus the family I could build. By morning, I had my answer. I called Mr. Thorne, my voice filled with a newfound resolve. I'll do it. But only with Ren as co-guardian and all the support we discussed. I want you to know how proud I am of you, Serafina, Mr. Thorne said, his voice choked with emotion. Not just for taking this on, but for setting boundaries and asking for help. That's what breaking the cycle looks like. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Court hearings for guardianship. Cottage hunting with a social worker. Meetings with the kids' teachers and counselors. Setting up therapy schedules. Learning about trauma-informed parenting. My parents' criminal trial was set for the following month. They were being held without bail after the flight attempt. I hadn't spoken to them since the first hearing, and I didn't plan to. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. The day I officially gained temporary guardianship was surreal. The judge made it clear this was temporary, pending my parents' criminal trial and sentencing. But for now, I was legally responsible for my siblings, this time with support and resources and my own conscious choice backing it up. Ren and I moved into a 4-bedroom cottage, subsidized by the Family Assistance Program. It was in a better neighborhood, close to both Emerald Meadow Guild and Ren's high school. We spent a weekend painting rooms and assembling furniture, trying to make it feel like home. The kids were brought over on a Tuesday afternoon. They looked shell-shocked, clutching sacks of hastily packed belongings. The 8-year-old, Marcus, wouldn't meet my eyes. The twins, Rosa and Elena, hid behind the social worker. Little Gabriel, now 3, reached for me instinctively, then pulled back, confused. "Hey, guys," I said, kneeling to their level. "I know this is scary and confusing, but Ren and I are going to take care of you for a while, okay? This is your new home." "Why can't we go home?" one of the twins asked, her voice laced with a child's innocent bewilderment. "Because Mom and Dad made some bad choices and have to face consequences," Ren said gently, her arm protectively around Elena's shoulder. "But we're going to be okay, all of us, together." It wasn't easy. The first week was a blur of tantrums, tears, and questions I didn't know how to answer. Marcus finally broke down and admitted our parents had told him I was trying to steal them away. It took patient explanation from his therapist to help him understand the truth. But slowly, painstakingly, we found a rhythm. Ren and I split the morning routine. I handled breakfast while she got the little ones dressed. We hired a reliable caregiver, Mrs. Olson, a sweet woman who lived nearby, for the hours between school and when one of us could be home. The kids did homework at the kitchen table while I cooked dinner. Ren helped with baths and bedtime while I studied. It wasn't the guild experience I'd dreamed of, no late nights or coffee shop writing sessions, but it was real, it was mine, it was ours. The instructors at Emerald Meadow Guild were incredibly understanding about my situation. Several had been through similar experiences and offered extensions when family court dates conflicted with assignments. My progress remained strong, even with the chaos at home. 3 months into our new arrangement, something beautiful happened. I was reading when Gabriel tugged on my book. "Serafina," he said, using my actual name. "Tell me a story." I put the book down and gathered him into my arms. "Once upon a time," I began, "there was a little boy who was very brave." Ren caught my eye from across the room, where she was helping Marcus with his math. We both had tears in our eyes. This was what love was supposed to look like, not obligation or tradition or guilt, just choice and care and building something better. My parents' trial was difficult, both emotionally and practically. I had to testify about their neglect and manipulation, reliving the trauma I'd tried so hard to escape. Ren stood by me every step of the way, her presence a constant source of strength. In the end, they were found guilty on all counts. They received the minimum sentence of 2 years in prison, a bittersweet victory. Part of me wanted them to suffer more, but another part just wanted it to be over. The judge made the temporary guardianship permanent. Ren and I were officially the legal guardians of our siblings. Life wasn't perfect, far from it. There were still tough days, arguments, and moments of overwhelming exhaustion. But we had each other, and we had support. The kids were thriving in therapy, learning to express their emotions and trust again. Ren blossomed as a student and a caregiver, discovering her own strengths and talents. I found joy in my studies, in the stories I was finally free to write. One evening, a few years later, I sat on the porch of our little cottage, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. Gabriel, now a bright and curious 6-year-old, sat beside me, drawing pictures in a notebook. "Serafina," he said, looking up at me with his big, innocent eyes. "Are you happy?" I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached all the way down to my soul. "Yes, Gabriel," I said. "I am. We all are." And in that moment, I knew that we had truly broken the cycle. We had transformed a legacy of obligation into a legacy of love, a story of survival into a story of hope. We were a family, not by blood or tradition, but by choice, by commitment, and by the unwavering belief that a better future was always possible. And that, I knew, was a story worth writing.